everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your critique of the week. It's Friday, April 10th. So glad you could join me for another fun, exciting critique. We're going to be workshopping some poems. Let's see, who do we have here? Mary Keating is here, first one in. Dee Coleman is here. Rose Leonard, Jamie Thomas, Winston Munn, Christine Nueven, Mary Lisa D. Diminishes, our reigning prompt poet of the month this year. Steve Horrell, Tom Barlow's here. Mary Keating, I already said. Mary Keating's doing a nice prompt thing for April. I see some great photos that you can check out on her Facebook page she's posting. Nancy Sabanik is here. Holly York. Ryan McCarty says, this is always one of the first of many great things about it being Friday afternoon. Ah, well, thanks. Thanks, Ryan. Let's see. Danette Burmia is here. She's got some in the queue, she says. That's great to know. We got one poem. We'll do Danette's. Let's see. Clayton Clark is here. Who else has poems? Let's see. Sam. So Sam on our 3JV. He's got poems in the queue. Let me know, Sam, your full name there, so that we can just leave a comment so I can pull that up. Katie Dozier's here, the next room over. Hey, Katie. Terry Miller. Lisa Seidenberg. Doug Van Houser's here. Matthew Scoggins. Excellent. All right, so we're going to do that whole critique thing where we look around, talk about poems, leave as many comments as you can in the chat window, talk about what works, what doesn't, how the poem is operating. We'll talk about all that. We'll talk about small things like, diction and line breaks, the voice, bigger things. I guess the voice is a bigger thing. We'll talk about just what we get out of the poem is always the main thing. Let's see. Melissa Matthews says some in the queue. Sam Bolan. Okay, so we got a bunch of people here. We're not going to get to everybody, but we'll do our best. And that's perfect timing because the music just ended. All right, so let's see. Sam Bolan's got some right there. Two right at the very top. That's always nice to have some fresh poems. And Cheryl Wayant. Let's see. Cheryl Wayant's got... Let me just bear with me while I figure out what we're doing. Cheryl Wayant's got two short ones. And then we'll do Danette Burmia. I think we've done Danette not too long ago. So, which is nothing wrong with that. But I'll put her third on the list for today. I could be wrong about that, though, even. I don't know. It's hard to remember stuff over the years, over the days, over the weeks. But we've got... Cheryl. And we wanted Danette Burmia, too. Right, Danette Burmia. Okay, so let's jump in and do some critiquing. We've got three poets up on hand. We'll see if we can get to all three today. Let's go to Sam Bolan first. And Sam had two poems. Sam says, this one's pretty new. I don't know how objective I'd be able to be given how difficult the subject is. It was actually inspired by Lori Jaquila on the Rattlecast when she said, on the day he died, I had to pause. So that's the first poem, and this is Sam Bolan from Virginia. Let's take a look at this poem. It is 1 day and 4 days later. Here we go. Right here. Let me just make sure. Did I start all the streams? Yeah, started that one. Okay. Oh, yeah, and over on Facebook, there's a little bit of crew hanging out. Jackie Chow is there. She's got a poem in the queue, too. Probably not going to get to it, but I'll make a note of that, Jackie. And then Donna Best's over here, too. And Facebook leaving comments. And over on X, it's streaming, but I don't know how to see the comments live. So anyway, here we go with the first poem. 1 day and 4 days later. On the day she died, he was dying too. She stopped speaking long ago. Weakly, he began anew. She knew we tried to give her everything he'd need, but she could draw no breath as tumors grew with greed. Struggling, gasped, and left us, swimming, first across the sky. Had to feed him with a spoon, knowing he'd be next. I cried. His chest buzzed against my head with liquid so misplaced. 15 years, my marrow knew. I pulled him to my waist. He looked for her and barked again, then followed to the stars. It never ends, as we all learn that grieving only starts. Well, I love the last line, and the slant rhyme, the stars to starts. I would suggest, because that is such a strong thing, I would do a little bit, waist and placed, has a very, very slight slant to it, not much. And I would sort of keep it keep the rhymes. Try to keep the rhymes with this because it's a cool way, but it feels a little bit like you couldn't get the words you wanted when you have these true rhymes that are like to and a new and need and greed, which aren't great rhymes anyway. Remember, we talk about if you're writing a poem that rhymes, try not to go to the first word you think of, like an association game, because then that ends up driving the poem and it doesn't feel as authentic or interesting as if you go to surprising rhymes. Because really the thing about rhymes is you have this expectation that's set up, and then the expectation is partially met but not quite met. And that interplay between those two things creates a lot of dopamine and is very pleasurable. And one of the things we learn, because we're always looking for patterns. And so having a pattern established but being off a little bit and sort of moving around, it being a sort of a moving target is the most pleasing, really. And that's why poems that have rhyme that are too perfect are always end up feeling kind of sing-songy. And we want to avoid that just generally. And having surprising words and words that we don't expect to come rhyming, which is why we talk about rhyming across parts of speech. Don't just rhyme nouns with nouns or whatever. Try to rhyme, and that's to keep them surprising, to happen in surprising places within the syntax. All sorts of things like that really help the poem feel pleasurable to us as listeners of the music. And I really love the way that stars and starts shifts. So my first suggestion would be to try to rewrite it using all rhymes that are slightly slanted like that, and I think that would improve one aspect of it. Let me see. Yeah, and so Kimberly Gibson Tran says, formal poems are good for exploring grief, so it's on the right track. Just needs to strive for more subtleties and surprises. Yeah. And Chelsea McClellan says, the poem is almost in ballad meter, but not. So I'd recommend looking into some ballad poems. Yeah, and the ballad is a ballad. It goes 4 feet and then 3 and then 4 and then 3. Is that right? Let's see. Yeah, Terry Miller says I find the she and him a little confusing. Okay, let's take a look more into it. This is 1 day and 4 days later. On the day she died, he was dying too. And so that is a really nice opening sentence. Whoever said that, I think it was Terry maybe, said that it was a good opening. And I think it is a great opening. So I'd leave that. She stopped speaking long ago. Weakly, he began anew. And this is the first time, like the rhyme is so close and so perfect and final, because all of the rhymes also end the sentence or the section of the sentence. And so that's how it feels kind of sing-songy because of that. And so what I would suggest is look up the to, pick a different word that's slanted off to. I don't know, what's slanted off the to? Toe, I guess. And find rhymes with toe instead of to. And think about rhymes like that. And see how you can get something surprising into that mix with a slight slant so you get to that slant at the end and it fits. Kimberly Gibson Tran points out anew is also an archaic word, so it bends the tone in a weird way. Yeah, that's a good point too. Anyway, let's keep going, reading it more. Weakly, he began anew. She knew we tried to give her everything she'd need, but she could draw no breath as tumors grew with greed. And again, the greed need, it feels really like we thought of greed because it rhymes. It's the first thing you think of when you see need. And then we wrote the sentence to the greed. And what we want to do is have the rhymes pull you in a surprising place to surprise yourself. It's really a trick to make it so you don't know where you're going as you're writing. And that lets the poem feel, like a fresh expression. That's how we make it new, as Pound said. And so we want to be drawn toward things that surprise us, and having the rhyme not be the first thing you expect will help that draw out. And there's a little bit, we'd love, I think, some more detail. She stopped speaking long ago. Weakly, he began anew. She knew. And then there's this new. We go a long way without any real images or any sense of, imagine her, in a bed or something, like give us something to sort of hang on to in one of these lines so we can sort of get a sense of the place. And that'll help too. Yeah. Winston Munn suggests for this end stop thing to look at some more William Carlos Williams poems. And yeah, definitely. So what you want to have is rhymes that surprise us, that twist around the syntax. And writing toward that surprise will help bring out the details and the surprisingness in the middle, and I think that'll bring the poems to life, because we all like the beginning and we like the end, I think. Mark Grenier says, who or what died? Let's read the poem again, because I haven't gone through the whole way, but it seems pretty clear to me. But maybe not. On the day she died, he was dying too. She stopped speaking long ago. Weakly, he began anew. She knew we tried to give her everything she'd need, but she could draw no breath as tumors grew with greed. Struggling, gasped, and left us swimming first across the sky. He had to feed him with a spoon. Knowing he'd be next, I cried. His chest buzzed against my head with liquid so misplaced. So how I'm reading this, just to say, is that the speaker's mother died, and then 4 days later, the father died, which is pretty. I mean, that's a pretty rough thing to experience, and surprisingly common as far as I've read, that couples tend to go in the same time very frequently. So so it makes sense to me. But I think the people who are lost, Mary Lisa says who, what, where, when, why, and how. Mark Grenier says who or what died. You have to kind of piece that together. And when we say had to feed him with a spoon, for example, we could say, after the funeral, I still had to go home. I mean, we do it more musically than this, but after the funeral, I still had to go home and feed my father in his hospice bed with a spoon or something. Let us actually know who those people are. Just say it directly, so you don't have to piece it together, because holding that back keeps us from connecting to it. Like the mystery you want in the poem is the emotional mystery, is the deeper thing it's hard to express. That being a mystery is great, but the specific details, we don't want that to be a surprise. We want the readers to understand what's going on so they can connect with it. Isn't it a dog? Did I miss that part? See, maybe I missed some part. He had to feed him with a spoon, knowing he'd be next, I cried. His chest buzzed against my head with liquid so misplaced. 15 years my marrow knew, I pulled him to my waist. He looked for her and barked. Oh, barked again. Sorry, I guess I missed that. You're right, the dog died. Oh, both are dogs. Okay. Well, there you go. Well, we need a lot more of that then. He looked for her and barked again. I guess there's nothing to suggest that it's a mother. I think I just filled in that gap. And that's, I guess, the problem with having gaps. You fill it in. So definitely let us know a little bit of the details. He looked for her and barked again, then followed to the stars. It never ends, as we well learn that grieving only starts. Yeah. Alyssa Matthews says, wait, they're both dogs? Yeah, I guess they are. So it could still be, the second one, which I leapt to it being the father who died 4 days later, is definitely a dog. The first, she who died, we don't know. It's not clear. So, yeah. Sam says this was hard to even write. No, I'm sorry for what you're going through. It is really tough. I know. Yeah. Mary Lisa thought it was a married couple too. Maybe the dog's names. Yeah, we can get, I think it's a good first draft, and it has two really strong things in it, which is this beginning. The opening is really strong, and the ending is really strong. So how do we fill in the details between the two becomes the real question. Oh, yeah, Rose Leonard points out, thanks, Rose, she stopped speaking. That makes us think it's human. Yeah. The verb speaking is confusing. Yeah. Okay. So clarity is just the main thing. We don't want to have to hunt and guess. We want to know what it is, and we want to know what we're connecting with on an emotional level. And you can feel the emotion behind the poem, and especially in these great lines like this. And I love that line, that grieving only starts. That's one of those things where I would Google that line, because it's so good that it feels like it might be a cliche. How can that not be a cliche? But a lot of times that's not, you look up a great line, you're like, how did no one ever say that? But the fact that grieving only starts and never ends is really cool. So that's a great line. Right towards that, but give us the details of the poem. Okay, let's take a look at the other one. Again, we're looking at poems by Sam Bolan from Virginia. Let's see. And then we'll take a look at the other one here. And Sam says about this one, honestly, I've never attempted a sestina before. I just don't know how it hits, if it's too melodramatic, if it works in general. Okay, so here's the sestina. One thing we saw, just a general suggestion, don't do the columns with your poems. Just let them go down the page, because when you're submitting in places, it makes it harder to format. You have to kind of deal with the columns. And it makes it harder to read, given like screen readers and how people actually are reading submissions. So just let it go down the page. Don't worry about putting it on one page or whatever. Like wherever it's published is not going to do this. Just let it run. Okay. Kimmy Gibson Trent says, "Yay, sestina." Yeah, and I like already. So just glancing at a glance, knowing this is a sestina that doesn't have the sestina creep, which is where the lines get slowly longer and longer and longer as you sort of have to stretch yourself to get to the word you're repeating. It's nice to see a sestina that doesn't have that. Also, a sestina with short lines is really hard to do. So it's nice to see a short line sestina. So let's take a look at this one. And for those who don't know, maybe there are people who don't know what a sestina is. This is the form where you have the last word of every line repeats. So fog, grave, slid, visiting, closer, bones. Those all repeat. But then the first one becomes the second one, and line 2 becomes line 3. Like it just goes like that. Line 4 becomes, I can never remember the details of how it goes. And sometimes they don't go in the certain order either. Anyway, that's a sestina. The general advice for sestinas is have words that you can use multiple ways. It's really nice if you can have multiple parts of speech is the words you repeat to, because that makes it easier not to get the syntax really repetitive. Have some good words that are like unusual with an image or something that it's good to repeat. So here, fog and grave, maybe a little close in meaning, but they're evocative. They're good words. Anyway, let's take a look. You came in when I came out. Recall your first time in the fog. Yeah, that is a good first line, as Kimberly said, I think. Recall your first time in the fog. I guided you along the grave, horde of guilts, and you slid across the quagmire, visiting. I pulled you in closer, anxiously. These are my bones. No real plan, but I'd thrown bones and reed leaves to clear the fog, to learn what was in the closet. I finally spoke with the grave, face-to-face facts, thoughts don't visit. You held me tight so I wouldn't slide. Now when you see me sliding, you grab me by the bones. Thoughts can more than visit. Help me wave away the fog. I'll clear my voice of gravel and allow my eyes to close. Truth snuck close to me and slid into the guilt grave to be born on the misty fog, and decided that visiting was only for visitors, not for facts held close, but confusion creates fog. I couldn't just slide into it with open bones and let it make its grave in me without grave inspection. So I visited the place. I laid my bones and pulled truth close to us so we could slide together through the fog. Remember the grave with the fog. No longer a visitor, you slide in close to my bones. So there's this one. Yeah. Kimberly Gibson Tram says, cool swap with bone, born for bone. Tom Barlow says, like thoughts don't visit. Kimberly Gibson Tram says, I'm sad that the second stanza doesn't clarify anything. Yeah, my general thought, Kimberly Gibson Tran says, nice first stanza if a little cryptic. And it is. I feel like the poem is sort of too cryptic and repetitive. I think we need to get into more detail and more of what's going on. Again, it's like both these two poems are kind of holding a lot back of the story. And again, let us know the who, what, why, where, and when. Let us know what's going on, because that's the only way we can really connect to it and feel it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Mary Lisa says it rolls away and back toward itself, the destination. Yeah, and Kimberly Gibson Trent says the trick, I think, is to make this a narrative poem. Yeah, it's a really good way to put it. we want some story to develop, even with the repetition, and that's sort of the magic when you can make it work. That's what makes a sestina feel magical. That there's a progression even as you're repeating these words, and that's really the trick of it. It's a really hard form to do, and like I say, it's one of my least favorite forms because you see so many sestinas that don't have that sense. Let's see. Roselanard says the title helps to clarify the narrative. You came in when I came out. Yeah, and I wonder, is that like a... Let's see, let me read it again, and we'll look at maybe more detail. You came in when I came out. Recall your first time in the fog. And that is a great first line. I guided you along the grave horde of guilts, and you slid across the quagmire, visiting. I pulled you in closer, anxiously. These are my bones. No real plan, but I'd thrown bones and reed leaves to clear the fog, to learn what was in the closet. And then the closer becomes closet in this one. I finally spoke with a grave, face-to-face facts. Thoughts don't visit. You held me tight so I wouldn't slide. Now when you see me sliding, you grab me by the bones. Thoughts can more than visit. Help me wave away the fog. I'll clear my voice of gravel and allow my eyes to close. Truth snuck close to me and slid into the guilt grave, to be born on the misty fog and decided that visiting was only for visitors. This is where I sort of get lost. So I'm thinking, with in the closet, and then you came in when I came out. I think it's coming out of the closet, and using the fog as a metaphor for that works. And I think it's interesting, the first two stanzas like that, but I start to lose the thread. It starts to feel repetitive with the fog. I don't know what's representing. And I get a little bit lost in this. Truth snuck close to me and slid into the guilt grave, to be born on the misty fog, and decided that visiting was only for visitors. Yeah. Yeah. It's Clayton Clark says, like the tone, but I feel removed again. Yeah. It's just, we have to just get more detail and more of the story into the poem. And I think, one of the ways we have graves, and we have, bones, and we have fog, and those can sort of be both literal and metaphoric at the same time, which they kind of are here, but we could make that more clear where we're actually doing something, in a foggy grave, like put us literally there in some places, but let it be a metaphor other places. Let's see. And Rose says, you came in tells us that the you got closer to the narrator, close to their bones, once the fog of being in the closet was cleared. Yeah. Yeah, and Jamie Thomas says, it's clear the poet knows what they're writing about. I just wish they'd share it with me. Yeah. And Kimberly Gibson Tran says, a strategy in a sestina is to think about where the words are going to repeat across stanzas. In other words, there's a way to build the lineup of words so certain ones repeat in the right place. Now, that's a very tricky form. Yeah. How does it end to? And me, I couldn't just slide into it with open bones and let it make its grave in me without grave inspection. So I visited the place, I lay my bones, and pulled truth close to us, so we could slide together through the fog. Remember the grave with the fog. No longer a visitor, you slide in close to my bones. Yeah. So I agree with everybody who said that it's a nice voice, too, and a nice sort of atmosphere to the poem. We just want some narrative progression, yeah. Yeah. Jenny Middleton says, there is a supernatural feeling in some of the imagery, ghost bones, skeletons from my mind. Yeah, it's true, and I just like to put it all together. Elizabeth Brown says, also maybe cut words to make it more rhythmic. Relentless, grave of guilt sounds so much better. And also, I agree with Tim and others' comments about narrative progression. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing this, Sam. And I think, both poems have a lot of heart in them, a lot of meaning behind them. It's just a matter of letting us see that, letting us share it, and putting the story in so that we can really know what's going on and feel what you're feeling. Because that's what we want to do. We want to understand. what a poem is we walk into, or your breath walks into us and animates us. It gives us the animus of being in the situation you are and feeling what you feel. And that's really what a poem does. So we just need to know more about what's going on. But really nice use of rhythm and language, and I think heading in good places. All right, let's take a look at the next poets up. We had Cheryl Wayant, who I think she said she had 2 short poems, right? Yeah, one's pretty short. The other's pretty average, I'd say. Let me look at the first poems. General questions. On Passerby, on past episodes, I understood the personal ineffectualness in the face of the world's injustices as a common poetry topic. Is this one saying enough, or am I adding to the count for no good reason? So it's always a great question for the passerby. Let's take a look. The Passerby. And again, this is by Cheryl Wayant from Illinois. Sorry. Here we go. Sorry, a little tickle in my throat. Okay. The Passerby. I saw a man lying on the side of the road, well-dressed, face down, briefcase in hand. My companion hurried along. Perhaps this was normal here, I shrugged, but a part of me knew better. When we returned from lunch, he was there, surrounded by a crowd. But the man lay still, unchanged. I'll never know if he saw me pass, as he died like a dog in the street. I only know I'm the type of person who lets a man lay dying. When bombs dropped on hospitals, children wrenched from parents, and babies were dying of blockades, my friend invited me to protest. And I saw injustice in a sign. The crowds were all chanting, but I saw the man lying unnatural in the dust, and then babes, unfed like folded bones. I'll never know if they saw my cardboard as they passed to dying realms. Among the slogans, I fell silent, as if passing on my way to lunch, because I'm the type of person who lets a man lay dying. Yeah. Let's see. Intriguing opening, a few people say. Yeah, the passerby. I saw a man lying on the side of the road, well-dressed, face down, briefcase in hand. And it's an unusual scene. There's a few, really, how I feel about this poem is there are a few really interesting moments, and then there's a lot of sort of flat things that don't really add a lot in between them. And that first line, Ashley Newtnagel says, interesting, I would like more specifics. What was he wearing? What did the sign say? And yeah, exactly. So let's take a look. I think the main thing is that there's a lot of, I don't know, there's good things, but we want more detail. Again, like the last poems too, we want a lot more detail so we can connect with it. So let's see the well-dressed man. Let's see more of the details about what it looks like, what the surroundings are, so we get a picture of the place. The passerby. I saw a man lying on the side of the road, well-dressed, face down, briefcase in hand. My companion hurried me along. Perhaps this is normal here, I shrugged. See, my companion hurried him along as, and then describe a little bit more of what kind of ground he's laying on, how the position of his face. Is it like his face smashed into the ground? Is he lying on his, I guess he's face down, but how are his limbs? There's a lot you can describe there. Help us make that scene come to life. Perhaps this was normal here, I shrugged, but a part of me knew better. When we returned from lunch, she was there, surrounded by a crowd. And then you can tell us something what the crowd is doing, too. There's these spots where we can get more detail. But the man lay still, unchanged. Show us something that's unchanged. His hat, despite fluttering in the wind, was still at the 45-degree angle that it used to be. I mean, you'd say it more poetic than that. But, show us some detail that's unchanged so we can see that. I'll never know if he saw me pass as he died like a dog on the street. As someone already pointed out, died like a dog is pretty cliche. We want something different there for sure. I only know I'm the type of person who lets a man lay dying. And I think this is a great line. It's one of those blunt statements that really is full of meaning, and you wonder what exactly does that mean? And there's a whole bunch of morality layers to it. It's fascinating to say it like that directly, and then how much that makes you curious and makes you interested in that line. It's a great line. And I think, you sense that writing the poem because it repeats later. So that's kind of the heart. So we want to find quick visual ways without dilly-dallying and straying to get from this beginning to this line and continue on. When bombs dropped on hospitals, children wrenched from parents, and babes were dying of blockades, my friends invited me to protest, and I wrote injustice on a sign. The crowds were all chanting, but still I saw the man lying unnatural in the dust, and then babes unfed like folded bones. Here's another great line, unfed like folded bones. It's really nice. Yeah. Alyssa Matthews says, the first stanza is so personal and the second stanza so global, I had a bit of whiplash. Our vid notes, I think it's Rachel Greaves says, does anyone care about lying or laying, or has English moved on to the point where either is correct? I think we still correct them, but it's easy to miss. Yeah, so the man should lie dying. It's a good point. And I think, yeah. Okay. Jamie Thomas says, there are some great lines in description, but it dips just too far into trying too hard to be a parabolic teaching rather than a parable-like teaching, I think she means, rather than an authentic experience. Yeah. Anyway, we'll keep going. Unfed. Yeah, and somebody pointed out, too, that the babes rather than babies is a little odd. It's a little archaic. It makes it feel a little biblical, but the rest of the poem doesn't do that. So I would just say babies, unfed like folded bones. I'll never know if they saw my cardboard as they passed to dying realms. Among the slogans, I fell silent, as if passing on my way to lunch, because I'm the type of person who lets a man lay dying. Yeah. So bring out the details, and it does feel, somebody mentioned the whiplash from going to here to the global. It feels a little too set up. There's too much known what we're going on to be surprising. As Kimberly Gibson Trent says here, stanza 2 is mainly a repeat of the idea of stanza 1, so maybe unnecessary. Yeah, what I would do, I saw a man laying on the side of the road, face down, briefcase in hand. Give us more detail, describe it, moving along. Tell us what happens, like very literally, so we understand. You return, you wonder, and then say, I'm the type of person who lets a man lay dying. And then instead of going back and doing this parallel structure, dig into what I'm the type of person who lets a man lay dying, what that means. It feels like you'd almost run off like a riff of a list here. I'm the person who lets a man lay dying. I'm the type of person who blah, 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 blah. I'm the type of person who blah, 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 blah. Like push into that thought. See what comes up when you dig deeper in there. And I think that's where the poem's destination is. So this is sort of like a half-done poem. Like it got to the interesting part, to the part where it turned. And instead of, following that change in course and that path, it looped back and sort of repeated and showed like a mirror of like the first half at a different time. And that didn't go anywhere surprising with that. It just sort of repeated itself. So take a turn here. There was like a detour, dig into exploring what it means to be this type of person. And that's where to go with this poem. But some good lines. And again, a nice sense of voice and rhythm, a very natural speech, which is nice in a poem. Yeah. Okay, I think that's what we can say about this poem, The Passerby. Let's take a look at another one. And again, this is Cheryl Wayant. And of the second poem, Cheryl says, Home Repair, I heard another editor lamenting that so much poetry is about pain and broken glass and ghosts, and the poet should please stop submitting such cliched drivel. So I did all of it in one short poem. I love that response. It's like a challenge anytime you hear not to do something. I like that. Probably cliche drivel, but please let me know. Also, I did a weird transition to a rhyming scheme that fits the feel of the poem in my mind, but maybe not to others. So let's look at both those things and the poem as a whole. And the poem is short. It is this. Home Repair. I was pulling at the pane in the basement window well. It cracked and then it shattered. My thumb bit. I saw it bleed. I sucked at it. Again, I thought... But perhaps it had had been time to allow in breeze and light to bleed out mold and mildew or entangled ghost or two. So long, so long, they've hallowed there, haunting in their basement stair. If only they left another way than through a broken pane. Well, that's interesting, kind of funny, going through the broken pane, the literal there. Yeah. Okay. Home repair. Let's read it again. It's a short one. And it is interesting. There's a way that, talking about the shift to the rhyme, the mildew to their stairway pane, it does feel like there's like an incantation quality. Like normally I'm not a fan of shifting into rhyme like that. But it makes me think of ways it could work, which is interesting. Because usually it just feels like you hadn't found the poem yet, and then it makes the poem feel like really incomplete, like a rough draft if it does that. And of course that takes you out of the poem, making it feel that way. Let's see. Well, let's look at more line by line. Home repair. I was pulling at the pane in the basement window well. It cracked, and then it shattered. My thumb bit. I saw it bleed. I sucked at it. Again, I thought. So the again I thought is interesting. Chelsea McClellan says again I thought. I don't know. I think you can italicize or use quotes around that or not. It depends if you get lost in it. There's some Cormac McCarthy novel. There's no question marks or quotation marks, I think, in most of his novels. And it works fine as long as it's done in a way that's not confusing. Again, I thought. And the again I thought is interesting too, because why again? Like the again is really key. But perhaps it had been time to allow the breeze and light to bleed out mold and mildew or entangled ghost or two. I think it's missing like an like an article here, or an entangled ghost or two. Long, so long, they've hallowed there, haunting in the basement stair. If only they left another way than through a broken pane. Yeah. Chelsea McClellan says I was confused by the again, but could just be me. Yeah, the again. I guess the again is strange. Like this already happened once before. Like why? It raises some questions to me. Yeah. PMB says Faulkner does it in The Sound and Fury. I don't know what you're referring to though. Let's see. I was pulling at the pane in the basement window well. It cracked and then it shattered. My thumb bit. I saw it bleed. Yeah. Yeah, I'm wondering. So I think maybe I don't know. I'm thinking about the rhyme and picking up the rhyme scheme halfway through, which I generally don't like. And I would just go back and make the poem rhyme all the way through, since you ended with a rhyme. Like if the rhymes start to creep up, I mean, there's two ways it can go. And we see this in submissions and on Critique of the Week sometimes, where a rhyme will start picking up, and then you sort of get addicted to your own rhyme, and you just start like rhyming, and it sort of ruins the poem. It's like a false turn. And I think maybe the poem just wants to rhyme the whole way through is not other possibility. And here I think maybe you could come up with more surprising ways to use and have, like we were talking about at the very beginning, having the rhymes draw you to surprising things makes the poem more interesting. Yeah. Let's see. And Terry Miller says the poem lack a strong turn. And yeah, I think there's like almost a cut calling it home repair, where that cuts against the topic because we sort of forget that's what it's about. But yeah, the poem, I don't know. I'd like to see more from the poem, I guess. And it's another case where you could dig deeper into what you're exploring, Who are the ghosts? Entangled, yeah. So here we have to bleed out mold and mildew or entangled ghost or two. Like, who would the ghost be? Like, we can go into some detail and describe who the ghost might be, who used to live there, who would haunt the house in the basement there. You know, anytime you can bring in details, it brings the poem to life. And so, again, we have sort of a little bit too general as far as what's being revealed. Yeah. Oh, okay. PMB says Faulkner doesn't use much punctuation in Sound and Fury in some sections. Yeah, I haven't read that in so long I forgot, but sure, yeah. Yeah. All right, well, there's some suggestions for that one. As far as the, like, the use of cliches and things you don't want to see, the challenge of that, I wonder if we could, push that even farther. The sort of take things very literally is always a way to go with that. Yeah. And I just wonder if we can push on that even farther. Like thinking of more cliches and more things that you don't want to do in a poem to take literally, like push that, lean on that a little bit more. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, let's move on to another poem. And a ghost is in the next poem as well. So let's see. Those were two, I should say, by Cheryl Wayant. Thanks for sharing those, Cheryl. We're going to take a look now at Danette Burmia. She's got two for us. She's going to ask about, are they succinct enough without losing important detail, or is further editing needed? So succinctness, we're going to look for that. Is the pacing more even down? And enjambment, any suggestions there? Okay, so we got two poems. Let's see. Ghosted is a pretty average size poem, little villanelle-ish length at glance, and Quiet Burial is a little shorter than that. Let's see. Ghosted, an essay, or assay, depending on where you are. There we go. Ghosted, an assay. And we are, I guess I should say this forum, there's when we had a poetry space on this forum. That's Katie's show, the poetry space with Jane Hirschfield. It's her forum. She was talking about the essay, which is really fun. Check that out over on iTunes or Spotify. Ghosted, an essay. Gauzy blobs vanishing on the stairs blink into text boxes, but only mine sink on the phone, screen leaving no rope gloves. Sorry. Screen leaving no rope grooves, anchor points, or divots. Canyoneers leave later climbers a specious thrill of thinking themselves first. Rain seeping through fault lines sculpts the cave beneath, pinging in an aquifer's wishing well. 1/3 salt, the Dead Sea, the lowest sea on land shrinks. Swimmers cannot sink, but they can drown. In precise conditions, ghost tracks, early fossil prints trek across desiccated marshlands that emerge and disappear again. Wondering what I did or didn't do rises like bubbles trapped in mud. Uncertainty is certainty when you find yourself where sea levels mummify hardwood, creating a phantom forest. Don't whistle after darkfall. Walk slowly where dirt doesn't shift. Loblolly pines hold their needles, and wild indigo lifts its petals to the sun. Painting windows, porch ceiling, and phone screen. Haint blue mimics the sky. Wisps don't nest there. Yeah, Jamie Thomas says this is very dense. Elizabeth Brown says, I like ghost tracks coming to the poem and where it goes. So there's interesting, it feels really, I think, in a weird way, it feels both too condensed and not condensed enough. Like it's moving through. So what an essay is sort of looking at a subject through all different angles. It comes from a biologist assay, like a geologist assay, looking at like what is examining minerals in an ore, and sort of smashing it apart and burning it up and doing everything you can to pull apart and look at it in every way you can possibly look at it. And so we get that here by looking at different kinds of ghosts. So there's the regular ghosts. There's being ghosted on a text. That's the beginning. I'm not sure what... I've heard of this before, but I can't remember what it's called, but canyoneers give later climbers a specious thrill of thinking themselves first. There's something about ghosts. I can't remember what the phrase is, but it has to do with climbing and how those anchors are left in a certain way. I'm not sure exactly what. But I've heard that before in a poem, I think. An aquifer's wishing well. I'm not sure what that is. But so we're all through here. The ghost sea is like a salt lake that's dried out. The ghost forest is where the trees become fossils. So we have all this stuff, and it feels very much like we're just jammed up. We don't get like a grasp of anything. If you take a look at an actual essay by Jane Hirschfield, you'll see it. There's sort of like breathing room. Let's see. I'll just put up whatever comes up as the top poem. Okay, well, here we go. I guess my Google knows me because it puts Rattle as the first, but this is from Rattle, Wetness, an essay. And here's this poem. But notice how she finds like the most interesting detail and lets there be space, sort of negative space, lets us linger about it. It doesn't rush. And that's sort of part of the way that it works because you're jumping so much in this poem type. And so, anyway... that we just need space to sort of digest every new element as the different angles and trajectories emerge. So here's Wetness, an essay. Take a square, a circle, flip it over, ask it to rotate, its face stays the same. An isosceles triangle doesn't choose which of its sides. A blinking light declares the whole night its far-off mountain. A person tilted a single degree knows their life altered. Even after, knows themselves guest in their house. Sometimes you see rain first, sometimes you hear it. Wind doesn't come from all directions at once. But anywhere rain is, that place is wet. Wetness, knowledge of pelt, of hide, of skin, dear, ungovernable, shivering. And so she goes, so this is, and usually the essays are more like this, where it's the emotion she's really exploring of the sort of the emotion that she's attached to the word or the topic she's addressing. So this is like the emotion of wetness explained in a lot of different ways. Terry Miller says like ladder rungs. That's a great way to put it. Or think of the way a ghazal works where each couplet is sort of its own unit of storytelling. Yeah. And so we want to have breathable space around each element here. And the problem with this one is that it's so crammed together that we don't get to sort of enjoy and let the whole thing swirl around us, you know? So gauzy blobs vanishing on stars blink into text box, but only mine sink on the phone, screen leaving no rope grooves, anchor points, or divots. So I think I would just restructure the poem by section so you can sort of see it clearly and get to the sort of the heart of it quicker in each one. And PMB says this, her economy of language in the Hirschfield is perfect, he says. Yeah. And just try to get that sense, because you have to, if you're jumping around so much, and it's great to be dense with your poems, but you need to have sort of space to unlock that density as a reader. And Kimberly Gibson Tran says the first stanza already mixes so many metaphors. Yeah, I guess that's the great description of the whole thing. The whole thing feels like a big mix of metaphors because we can't. It moves too fast to get our heads around each one. So section them off. You have a lot of detail. This is one of those poems where you can really carve it down into a really wonderful sort of jewelry or something, And so take each unit, each different thing you're talking about. Make it its own, you see how, and I think it's a little harder to see in this one than her other ones. So maybe let me just look at the other that comes up. This is from Poetry Daily. And we'll just look at the first bit because she does the same thing here. I think it might be easier to see. Interruption, an essay. Sometimes you took the shape of an unseen mosquito, sometimes of illness. Presumed most of the time to be passing, yet importunate as a toddler, who demanded her own way, as a phone that would not stop ringing long after it should, an ignorable pavement slap of the gone flat tire. And see how these are different things that are interruptions. And she's sort of, there's a way that it's like each one is a metaphor for interruption and how being interrupted feels, and like knowing interruption is coming. All afternoon, the thunder was interrupted by sunshine. All night, the rain was interrupted by trees and roofs. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it goes on like that, and you can see how it's spaced out. So basically, think about the spacing out of this stuff, and let each sort of the main nugget of each chunk of poem stand alone, so we get to sort of really explore it a little bit. Okay. And as Terry Miller said, a little edit and a little more thought will make this a great poem. I agree. There's a lot of substance there. I like it. I especially like the ghosting, because it's such a different kind of ghost, So, going there is really interesting. Okay, let's take a look at the other poem. And it is... And we didn't really talk about... She asked about line breaks and things, too. And I think, in this poem, the general thing is that it's so crammed together. Like sometimes when poems have like a really strong narrative thread, having sort of lines roughly the same length, and focusing on individual breaks and things like that makes a lot of sense. This doesn't feel. You notice in Jane's, if you go back, that the lines are different lengths based on the space they need around them, and that's another way to do it. Where the lengths in the sort of, I guess, if you look back at like David Kirby, either his Poetry Space episode where we talked about braids or his Rattlecast episode, he was talking about there's a tension between the storytelling he's doing and the shapes of the stanzas. Because we asked him why he does these stanzas, even these long poems with multiple narrative threads going on, why he cares about the stanzas looking a certain way when it's really a stream of a story coming out. And it's the tension between those two things that make it work. And so when you have like one long story, having stanzas that don't really fit with that creates a nice tension. But when you're jumping between, it's like you don't know where you're jumping between, and so that makes it a little bit harder to follow too. And so the fact that it's sort of too in line with its like fragmentedness makes it even more difficult to follow, where we should be doing the line breaks and the stanza breaks in a way to make the reading experience as useful as possible as the line breaks can be. And just sort of it doesn't cut against it. It amplifies what's already difficult to follow. And so having line breaks that are more natural in a poem like this, that's really jumpy and changes a lot of topics and is really dense, having those line breaks not be regular, not really worrying about enjambment as much, just worrying about the places you pause in speech, going more toward that end in a poem that has a lot of jumps and leaps in detail that we're trying to organize helps a lot. As opposed to where we have the thread of the story, then we can play with line breaks and uniformity and stuff a lot more because it's a contrast situation. All right. Okay, well, let's take a look at the other poem. A Quiet Burial. Where am I going? There. A Quiet Burial. Transient means passed over, trashed with a lace of fallen leaves, disregarded, people sleeping in riverwood breaks, only noticed when the city demands a cleanup. And when temperatures fall, we stay inside, turn on the heat. Weathercasts urge us to protect the 3 Ps, pets, plants, and pipes. The frozen body of a man slumped between a dumpster and a sycamore draws more attention to the encampment huddling under the interstate overpass. Heartwood holds trees together, but when roots fail, even trees fall among their own. Yeah, so this is interesting, and I feel like, remember I said Danette might have sent a poem before. I feel like maybe she sent this one before, and this is a revision. Is that possible? One of the things to point out right away is that I feel the same way about this poem as far as the breaks in the movement and the stanza structure as I did about the last poem, even though it's not quite as dense, it's more straightforward. But I think it goes with your voice better to have less enjambment. And look at how, I think Jane Hirschfield is a great example look at how Jane does line breaks, like I was saying before, because I think that would help this poem too, actually. There's a way that like Danette says these are both revisions. Okay. There's a way that it feels like the poem is like, both poems really are revealing themselves sort of in chunks of thoughts. Even though this is a more linear story, it's still chunks of thoughts. And so having that be more standard, pausing where you want to pause, and it's also both dense with detail, I think that fits the voice a lot better. So I would look at that just as a general thing. I think your poems might be better off in that, because that is how, there's more of a meditativeness is one way you could put it. And that's why maybe Jane comes up and you like, the essay as a form, which is one of Jane's forms, and it fits really well with that. Okay, let's look at more detail. Quiet burial. Transient means passed over. Trash with a lace of fallen leaves, disregarded people sleeping in riverwood breaks. I really love the people sleeping in riverwood breaks. Like great description there. Only noticed when the city demands a cleanup. But you notice how this feels like a whole unit of thought, even though it's a lot of lines. And so having the lines more like the way Jane does it would really help us organize it for ourselves as we read the poem. And when temperatures fall, we stay inside. Turn on the heat. It's just not the kind of poem. There's just a lot, especially because you asked about the enjambment, but there's just a lot more enjambment than the speaker of the poem wants, than the voice of the poem would use. It's too focused on that. Like the best enjambment, to look at a similar poet but very different in style would be Kay Ryan. Let me pull up, because it's an interesting point. Let me pull up a Kay Ryan poem really quick. This is the Niagara River from her book Niagara, and feel how I pulled it up because it's a short poem too, as case tend to be, which is always why it's a nice reference. The Niagara River, and feel how, because she's so musical, and everything is sort of warping together, and you're twisting around that. That's where you want a lot of enjambment. And it feels like this poem, Danette's poem, is enjamming in the way that Kay Ryan would, but in the way that Jane Hirschfield is thinking. And I think it's a really important distinction. It changes the emphasis of sort of where we are with our experience of the poem. Are we more with a body and the ear or more with the mind? And so as though the river were a floor, we position our table and chairs upon it, eat and have conversation. As it moves along, we notice, as calmly as though dining room paintings were being replaced, the changing scenes along the shore. We do know this is the Niagara River, but it's hard to remember what that means. And so you see how this is like one unit of thought. It's the same as, like I was saying with the David Kirby poem, it's one sort of unit of storytelling, even if it moves between different threads of narrative. And this is one unit of thought. And so having the tension of the line breaks against that sort of singularness of where she's going makes a lot of sense. It creates a really nice contrast. The opposite is true in this poem here, but it has the same kind of sort of really heavy enjambment that makes it a little harder to follow. So I think it's just an interesting point that we don't have it made very often, if ever. So anyway, when temperatures fall, we stay inside, turn on the heat. See, even here, and I guess I'm beating a dead horse, but this on its own line, then this on its own line would make the impact of those thoughts. It's like thoughts that are turning and turning over on themselves, and that helps. The format can help that. Weathercasts urge us to protect the 3 Ps, plants, pets, and pipes. This is a great line break, though. I do like this one because I expect it to be people, and not pipes. And I think you're setting us up for that. And I think that works really well. The frozen body of a man slumped. The frozen body of a man slumped between a dumpster and a sycamore draws more attention than the encampment huddling under the interstate overpass. Heartwoods hold trees together, but when roots fail, even the trees fall among their own. Yeah. So really, I like the progression of this. I like the edit from the previous poem. And, yeah. And I sort of think this, just like breaking it up in a way that we can experience it in that way. I think the line breaks are the main thing that are off with this poem. I don't really see any. There's nothing I have issue with. As far as, it's a nice, tight, concise storytelling. There's really great details. We get what you're talking about. It is as sorry, I was looking for something and I lost it. But anyway, it does work really well. It is difficult to have social justice. That's where it is. There it is. Kimberly Gibson Trans says, it's hard to write poems about social justice and injustice. It's true, and it does a good job with that. J.D. Middleton says, the poem could begin with a stanza about weather forecasts. That's an interesting idea, everybody says. Yeah. Elizabeth Brown says, nice title, too. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so anyway, I think just shaping this poem a bit. Somebody said, where is it? Elizabeth Brown says too much summing up at the end. Let's sort of read it one more time. I want to think about the poem more as a whole. I got really distracted by all the line breaks, which I guess the problem with having a lot of enjambment in a poem where it doesn't fit. You think about that too much. A quiet burial. Transient means passed over, trashed with a lace of fallen leaves, disregarded people sleeping in riverwood breaks, only noticed when the city demands a cleanup. And when the temperatures fall, we stay inside, turn on the heat. Weathercasts urge us to protect the 3 Ps, plants, our pets, plants, and pipes. The frozen body of a man slumped between a dumpster and a sycamore draws more attention than the encampment huddled under the interstate overpass. Heartwood holds trees together, but when roots fail, even the trees fall among their own. Yeah. PMB says, yes, the end. Even trees fail. Just maybe describe the trees falling instead of the moral. Yeah. Yeah, there is some, I think it could be a little tighter here. Heartwood holds trees together. But when the root, I think maybe the even. I think even makes, it's a really subtle difference. But I think that does feel a little bit sort of a moral judgment where we just want to let that stand. Heartwood holds trees together, but when the roots fail, trees fall among their own. Maybe those trees fall on their own. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, I'd love to see this again. I mean, just with those breaks helping the poem be highlighted. Anyway, thanks to Danette for sharing these. Always fun to look at revisions from Critique of the Week, and I really like the condension of that. So thanks for sharing it. That's going to wrap up the show for today. Thanks, everybody, for joining us and who shared poems. Let's see. I'm going to remind everybody that the Poetry Space, which comes out every Friday, just came out. We did an episode this morning, Katie and I, comparing, and that's Katie's show. It's not actually part of Rattle, but it's something we do together for fun. And we did another duel with haiku, modern haiku, going up head-to-head in a duel against Poetry Magazine. Can a haiku beat an entire poem? Head-to-head, we'll see. Check out the Poetry Space to find that. Now, this week's guest on the Rattlecast coming up is going to be Matthew Buckley Smith. Matthew, of course, wonderful. He's been a guest on the Rattlecast before. He's a great formal poet. The Soft Black Stars, richly full of formal poems, and great use of meter and rhyme throughout. And also a really, intensely interrogated personal story that the poem tells at the same time. So really great poet. Looking forward to talking to him more about the Soft Black Stars and some other poems maybe. That's coming up Monday, April 13th. And the prompt for this week was I still have to do it. It's right at Villanelle. Let me pull it up for everybody. It's to write a villanelle that features something you see every day, and you're the only person in the world that does. So Katie likes to do formal poems earlier in the month, and that's what this is. Write a fill out that features something you see every day, and you're the only person in the world that does. Submit your poems by Sunday night at midnight to be considered for an invitation to the Invited Prompt Lines after we talk to Matthew Buckley Smith. That's Rattlecast number 338, this Monday, April 13th, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great weekend in the meantime. We'll talk to you later. Goodbye.